Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Franklin. I serve as the regional manager for U.S. Senator Elissa Slotkin, representing Flint, Saginaw, Midland, and Bay City regions. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to join us tonight. The senator is here to talk to us about some of the issues that matter most to everyday people like you, like rising costs, access to health care, and of course, the impact the big, beautiful bill will have on our communities. Now, if you would like to ask a question to the senator, please press *3 on your phone. Again, to ask a question, please press *3. We kindly ask that you keep your questions brief so that we can hear from as many folks as possible. We're also taking some questions online from our online audience. So whether you're on the phone or watching us via streaming, just know that your voice matters. And if you would like to receive future updates from the senator's office, also press *6 to sign up for our newsletter. And with that, it is my honor to turn things over to U.S. Senator Elissa Slotkin.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everybody. This is Senator Elissa Slotkin coming to you from D.C., both on the phone and live streaming. Thank you for joining us. I know it's a busy afternoon here. I wanted to give you an update on and cut through the noise a bit on what President Trump calls the big, beautiful bill, and talk to you a little bit about how that bill, now that it's passed, is going to impact average Michiganders. So what we're going to do tonight is give a little bit of an update on the big issues that are covered in the bill. We're going to walk through what this bill does on healthcare, what it does on food assistance, student loans, energy and energy costs, and taxes. After I go through that brief, we're going to take questions. Again, if you want to ask a question, press *3. And if you want to sign up for our newsletter, we're going to put all the information you're going to hear tonight that I'm about to go through. We're going to put that in the newsletter and send it out to anyone who signs up, just so you have it in black and white and you don't have to take as copious notes. But I do want to make sure you understand that this bill will affect pretty much every single person listening in one way or another. It's a very significant bill. It passed with the vice president casting the tie vote or breaking the tie, and then the president signed it on July 4th. So it is coming to a theater near you. So again, let me start talking about particularly the issues of healthcare. On healthcare, obviously something that every American cares about. Every single American is going to be affected by this bill when it comes to healthcare, either because it's going to be harder to get and stay on your healthcare, or because as a result of this bill, we're concerned about the price of private insurance also going up as of January. So let me walk through what this means in black and white. Okay, first of all, if you are on the Affordable Care Plan, or what's called Obamacare, it's also called the Marketplace. That means you don't have employer-provided insurance, but you have purchased insurance, private insurance on the Marketplace. As of November 1st, 2025, so this November 1st, open enrollment begins, where you can sign up for a new plan, change your plan, and we are expecting people to see higher premiums on those plans and start having to pay some higher premiums as of January 1st. So who's this going to affect? There's about 500,000 Michiganders who get coverage through Obamacare or the ACA or the Marketplace. But the place this is really going to hit are people who are not, they're living above the poverty line, but they're not super wealthy. So for example, if you're on the Marketplace insurance and you're a family of four that makes $129,000 a year, right now we estimate you're going to pay potentially $5,500 more in health insurance come January. If you're a 60-year-old couple of two, empty nesters, you make $82,000 a year. We estimate that you could be paying $13,000 more in insurance. And that's because this bill took away some of the subsidies for people who are on the Marketplace. Now, we're going to put into our newsletter and into the links below, if you're watching on the live stream, a calculator, a way for you to put in your household income, your insurance on the Marketplace, and figure out how much more you may have to pay in order to stay on that insurance come this fall. But November 1st, that's when things are going to be changing. Now, you've probably heard what this bill does, that it affects Medicaid and people who are on Medicaid. In Michigan, that means you're on the Healthy Michigan plan. That's the name of the Medicaid plan in Michigan. It's about 600,000 Michiganders who are on some form of Medicaid assistance. We now will have coming in 2027, so about a year and a half from now, there will be new work requirements in order to remain eligible to be on the Healthy Michigan plan. That means you have to prove that you are working 20 hours a week or 80 hours a month. And if you're not working, you have to be in job training or some other eligible activity. Again, we're going to give you a website in our newsletter and down in the links below for you to understand and watch over time what those work requirements are really going to mean. But you will need to recertify that you're eligible for Medicaid every 6 months. That's a change. Right now, if you're on Medicaid, you have to re-up and requalify every year. Starting in January 1st, 2027, you'll have to re-up every 6 months. And again, prove every 6 months that you are working. In order to qualify, you will have to work anyone between the ages of 18 and 64. That's another change. It used to be that after 54 years old, you didn't have to show proof of work. Now, 54 to 64, you also need to work at least 20 hours a week in order to be eligible. And parents of children 14 and up must now also work. Before this, if you had children below the age of 18, you did not have to show proof of work. Now you will have to show proof of work. And you'll have to do that every 6 months. Later on in 2028, co-pays for anyone on the Healthy Michigan plan will go up. Right now, co-pays tend to be $1, $3. They're going to go up to $35 for most co-pays in 2028. So even if you don't get coverage on through Medicaid or through the Obamacare marketplace, what we're concerned about is prices going up for everyone else who's on private insurance. Many people listening right now are on private insurance. Maybe you have Blue Cross through your employer. Maybe you have some other kind of insurance through your employer. Right now, we are concerned that the healthcare companies are looking at the cuts to Medicaid. They're looking at the cuts to Obamacare and saying, well, hey, there's still going to be people walking into the ER after a car accident or a heart attack, but now they're going to be uninsured. We know that we're going to be charged more because we're compensating for the people who no longer have insurance. Just today, Michiganders may have seen in the newspaper, I think it was the Detroit News, there's a new report out that says nearly 1 million Michiganders could see their premiums go up this January by 17% for both employer plans and also the marketplace plans that we've been talking about. So think Blue Cross of Michigan, think Priority Health of Michigan. That means families who already pay on average about $6,000 a year for their private insurance could see an additional $1,000 added to their bill. You will get notified if your private insurance rates are going up in January. You'll be notified this fall. So either watch for those letters and those notifications or contact your insurance company to try and get a jump on what that kind of insurance change would mean for you. Now, there's lots of facilities in Michigan that rely on some federal funding and Medicaid funding. So we are concerned and watching very closely what happens to our hospitals and our community health centers. Because of some change in tax plans, our Michigan Hospital Association have said that they expect to lose $6 billion over the next 10 years. We are concerned about what that kind of a loss means for our hospitals, particularly rural hospitals, hospitals that aren't doing as well, that have a tough time making costs. And obviously, if you're a rural hospital that closes, that affects everyone, not just people who are on Medicaid. You want to deliver a baby, you want to take your child to the ER for a broken arm. We are concerned about what this bill means for hospital viability in general. We also have about 400 community health centers across Michigan, things like Great Lakes Bay and Saginaw, which I visited, that rely primarily on Medicaid funding. We are worried about those facilities keeping their doors open or scaling back their services. And then Planned Parenthood. There was a full-on ban of the use of Medicaid dollars for Planned Parenthood. Now, this isn't an issue of abortion. It's already not legal to use Medicaid dollars to get an abortion. But this bill effectively defunded the whole rest of the Planned Parenthood services. So think about OBGYN appointments, family planning appointments, all the other things that a lot of women use and access for their health. Have those funding for those things have been banned. That's in the courts right now. But I know some of you may know of Planned Parenthood centers that could be closing in your community. So that's what it's going to do on healthcare. And again, press *6 if you want to get on our newsletter list so you can get all that in black and white and calculate your own numbers. Let's talk about food and food assistance. This bill makes it harder to qualify for SNAP, what are usually called food stamps, or in Michigan, the bridge card, okay? These start early. These start by October 1, 2025, so this October 1st. There are new work requirements. The same work requirements I told you about Medicaid now also extend to people getting those bridge cards every month. So people 54 to 64 now also have to prove they're working 20 hours a week, 80 hours a month. And parents of children 14 and older also must prove that they are working. This is a big change, and it's going to happen pretty quickly here. Again, we'll put a website out there on how you can figure out what this means for you if you are on the bridge card, if you're on food stamps, and also how you can qualify and requalify, since you will need to qualify still every single month to get re-upped on your bridge card. In general, we are watching potential cuts in general to people on food stamps or on the bridge card starting October 1st, 2027. So in a couple of years, we could see real cuts to just how much money is available for people out there. That's the date where states are supposed to pick up some of the extra tab. And it's unclear that states can do that, the state of Michigan, and it's unclear what this means. So stay tuned for more details. But immediately, October 1st, work requirements are phased in for people to continue to get those bridge cards. Obviously, this will affect things like our grocery stores, especially rural grocery stores who have a lot of people who use those bridge cards. Okay, so that's food. Let's talk about student loans. We know how expensive it is to get a college education, to do post-secondary education, to get a graduate degree, to be a doctor or a lawyer. This bill cuts and caps options for federal student loans, which has, of course, been a huge way that people have entered the middle class and gotten into four-year institutions. The main date I want you to remember for student loans, when the first things start kicking in, is July 1st, 2026. So almost exactly a year from now. This is when your options on federal loans start to change. And that will particularly affect people trying to go to college and graduate school. This means that it's going to really affect anyone who's a high school junior right now, right? You're thinking about applying next year when you're a senior, and you're trying to go to school in the fall of 2026. This is the first group of young people that's going to really be affected by the caps that are in this big, beautiful bill. In particular, it affects the Parent Plus loan program. This is the program where parents can take out loans that help their kids afford college. Until now, parents could take out a loan that was based on the total yearly cost of, let's say, Michigan State University, minus any financial assistance your child may qualify for. But under the new bill, the big, beautiful bill, the Parent Plus loans are capped at $20,000 a year and $65,000 over a lifetime. So just to put that in perspective, you have a cap per year of taking out a loan as a parent for $20,000. But the cost of in-state tuition for, let's say, Michigan State is roughly $35,000 a year for in-state tuition. So right there, you're already creating a $15,000 gap that either needs to be filled by your child getting financial aid, you or your child taking out private loans, which have a higher interest rate, or figuring out some other way to cover that gap. So it really does affect particularly those who are hoping to go to school in fall of 2026. For graduate loans, there are fewer options and more caps on how much of a loan you can take. Parents, children, the whole thing, or students. Originally, you could borrow up to the full amount of the cost of attendance, again, minus any financial aid you got. Now, if you want to get a master's degree in public health, if you want to get a law degree, if you want to go to medical school and become a doctor, you can take $20,000 a year or $100,000 over a lifetime. Obviously, this is, again, if an average graduate school year is $35,000 at University of Michigan, but you can only take $20,000 out in federal loans, you will be forced to either get private loans or find another way to cover that cost. So you can see how this bill will affect students and parents thinking about higher education. And then for law school and medical school, you can take $50,000 out per year or $200,000 over a lifetime. But for context, public medical schools in the US are about $71,000 a year, which means like going to medical school is about $286,000 total. So you do not have the federal loans that will cover the cost of becoming a doctor. We're already concerned about this because we've got a doctor shortage in Michigan. So that's where we are on student loans. And again, we'll put into the chat more information on how to learn about these caps. But for anyone going to graduate school next year, for anyone going to undergrad next year, you should definitely pay attention. Okay, energy. Let's talk about our energy bills, what this is going to do to the cost of electricity, which we already know is very high in Michigan. This bill reduces energy supply just as demand is going up and up and up. We all know that we're using more energy. We're going to be using more energy in the next 10 years. And we already know that our electricity bills are high. So this bill in particular goes after solar projects in train and wind projects in train, but does a few other things. So first and foremost, if you were planning on buying an electric vehicle, the $7,500 tax credit for buying an electric vehicle expires September 30th, 2025, like in 2 months. So if you're going to buy an EV, that's what you want to do. You better go between now and September 30th so that you can get that $7,500 tax credit. Otherwise, it expires on September 30th. On January 1st, the government will stop the reimbursements and tax credits for residential clean energy upgrades. So this means if you wanted to insulate your home, transition to solar, make investments in your home to make your house more energy efficient, those projects have to be completed by the end of 2025 if you want to get a tax credit back. And irs.gov will walk you through what this means. It'll be updated. We'll put that in the chat. So make those home improvements, those clean energy own and insulation and improvements now in 2025. Later on in 2028, the federal government is going to, their investment in large-scale solar and wind will be fully phased out. Projects that start construction in the next year have to start producing electricity by the end of 2027 in order to qualify at all. So there's projects around the state, think like Groveland in the Upper Peninsula and CBS Solar. It's a family-owned business. They're building all the solar and wind because they had incentives. They were already in train, and now they're trying to figure out if they can meet all the deadlines in order to make those projects viable. So check with your local solar and wind project to see what this new bill means for them. But we are concerned because solar is in particular a really fast energy to get on the grid, that electricity bills could go up because we just need more energy and all of the above kind of energy. So based on some studies that have come out from a think tank called Energy Innovation, American families could pay about $160 more per year, could be even more than that, up to $320 per year. So we are watching that. We want more energy on the grid, not less. Okay. And by the way, those are Michigan jobs that build those energy projects. Solar and wind, we think that there's about 19,000 Michigan jobs, particularly in construction, that could be lost if these projects don't go through. Okay, lastly, let's talk briefly about taxes. I know there's been a lot of discussion about this in the media. Overall, there are some good things for working Americans, but I want to be clear that this bill definitely favors the wealthier tax brackets with permanent tax cuts. A few of the tax cuts are good. You've heard about no tax on tips. You've heard about no tax on overtime. I want to be open with you that those are temporary tax breaks. We have 3 years for those tax breaks to actually come back to constituents and consumers, as opposed to some of the tax cuts for the wealthiest tax brackets, which are permanent and in perpetuity. The truth is, most Americans are not going to feel a big change to their individual tax rates because a lot of these taxes are just a continuation of what people have already had since 2018. And so we'd ask you to really watch the fine print here. Again, Michiganders have no taxes on tipped and overtime, but at the same time, we're worried that the rack and stack won't work because of the increased price of healthcare, the potential increased costs of electricity, those kinds of things. So I'd ask you to sort of rack and stack the total sum of the bill, even though you will be hearing more about no taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime. What does this mean for particular tax brackets? I want to make sure people understand. We have a calculator where you can put in how much you make to understand how much you may hope to get back from the tax provisions, but also from this bill in general. If you make $18,000 a year or less, due to the loss of Medicaid and SNAP, for instance, we think people will be paying more every year, right? Regardless of what the taxes say. If you make under $53,000 a year, your budget will probably look the same as it does now, but you are likely to lose money in the out years because you have to cover, again, the government's loss of Medicaid and SNAP. So we'll put the calculator into the chat. What you should know is that if you make a lot of money, like for instance, if you make $6 million a year, you're going to get $300,000 back from this bill. So it definitely favors folks at the top of the tax bracket, and we'll let you figure out the details based on your specific tax bracket. Again, on the no tax on tips specifically, again, 3 years only, you can deduct up to $25,000 in qualified tips on your federal income taxes. If you make more than $25,000 a year on tips, you'll pay normal taxes on anything above $25K. And you must work in a specific type of job. Certain jobs that receive tips like servers and bartenders and hairstylists, fine. But other jobs like cooks, dishwashers, back of the house folks are not eligible. So be sure you watch the fine print on who gets to qualify for that. And on overtime, you can deduct $12,500 in overtime taxes if you file by yourself, or $25,000 if you file jointly. So there's more details that, again, we'll put in the newsletter on what you have to do to qualify. I think the thing that I wanted everyone to have was, first of all, some concrete details on what this bill does. The president has made clear is his signature bill. It's his big piece of legislation that he wanted to do early in his tenure, but it will impact every single Michigander. So I wanted to make sure to get that information out. More analysis and details are going to come out in the next couple of months. Certainly the state of Michigan is trying to figure out how to react to these changes. So keep posted, keep alert for changes, and we will do the same in the newsletter, again, plus *6 to get on our newsletter. Lastly, we want to hear from you, particularly the real stories of how these changes are going to affect you, the questions you may have, anything we can help with when it comes to banging pots and pans with the federal government. If you've got problems with the VA, with Social Security, et cetera, please call us. Our number is 202-224-5600. 4822 for any kind of assistance we can help you with. Okay, we're going to transition to questions. Press *3 if you want to ask a question. I know people have already been calling in and on putting things in the online, and I'm going to hand it back over to Matt to facilitate those questions.
All right, Senator, thank you very much for that update. Again, if you'd like to ask the Senator a question, please press *3. And let's get to our first question now with Christine from Flushing. She is on and she has a question about how the Trump administration's bill will impact seniors. Christine, you are live. Christine, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, go ahead. You're on live with Senator Slotkin to ask your question.
Hi, Senator Slotkin. So I am questioning existing student loans for those of us that are dealing with how are we going to structure repayment loans? Can you tell me how that is going to work? And two, I have a second question, a two-part, which is different. I am concerned about the senior citizens and those on Medicare.
Yeah. So let me take those one at a time. So first of all, on pre-existing loans, separate from this bill, if you have a question, it sounds like you do, on how to restructure, refinance, get a better payment schedule on a federal loan, I want you to call our office and then we can handle your specific loan. If it's a federal loan, if it's a private loan, you got to call that private lender. But if it's a federal loan, call us 202-224-4822. We've gotten this question a bunch. It depends what kind of loans you have. Call us and we can talk about the specifics. We're getting this question a lot because of how expensive university is. On the issue of Medicare. So this bill does not touch Medicare. So you should feel heartened by that. Medicare, obviously, is the healthcare for senior citizens 65 and above. It's considered a key part of what Americans work for their whole lives in order to get when they want to retire. So this bill has no changes for Medicare specifically. But I will tell you that people who are on Medicare rely on the same hospitals, the same community health centers. They rely on the same infrastructure in Michigan that everybody else does. So if you're living in the Upper Peninsula and there's already very few hospitals in your area, and a local hospital, I mean, I was in St. Ignace, right? And the St. Ignace Hospital folks were very clear. They're very concerned about this bill and what it's going to do to their ability to continue all their services, access care at the ER, all those things, pay for it, keep their doors open potentially. So if you're a senior citizen on Medicare, but you need to go in for regular treatments or checkups, and your local hospital is struggling and doesn't have as many providers, that changes your access to care. So Medicare in the black and white is not touched by this bill, but access to care could certainly be changed, given the tough losses that our hospitals are going to be taking over the next few years.
All right, Senator, we are now going to take another call from Dennis, who is calling in from Plymouth regarding the bill.
Hello.
Dennis,
Go ahead, Dennis.
Good evening. Good evening, Senator. I just wanted to, I know my question was, what do you think is good in the bill? I know you answered one question that it would be the continuation of the tax break that we've been getting since Trump signed over the bill. But what would be the increase if this bill wasn't passed?
Yeah, so good question. The President Trump in his first term passed his tax bill, I believe it was 2017, end of 2017. So it affected the next tax year. He made those tax breaks temporary, and they were set to expire this year, 2025. So he was very hot to trot to do this bill because he wanted to continue those tax breaks. It depends on your income. It depends whether you're a private citizen or a corporation, because our corporations also got very big tax breaks from his original bill that continue with this big, beautiful bill. So it depends on your tax bracket. But there's no doubt about it that he was hot to trot to do this bill because his old tax breaks were expiring. That's why most people are not going to see a significant change in their tax bill come next year, because it's going to largely feel like a continuation. I will say, you asked about some of the positives in the bill. As I mentioned, no tax on overtime and no tax on tips for 3 years. Is a positive thing. There's a lot of Michiganders who work overtime and work off tips. So that's something that's a positive thing. But again, I am concerned that when you take the rack and stack of everything in this bill, tax breaks versus increased healthcare costs versus whatever's going to happen to our electricity bills versus student loans going up, or the need to, student loans going down, and so needing to pay more. I just ask folks look at the totality of their budget coming out of this, not just one piece, because it's that big of a bill. But thanks for the question.
All right, Senator, we have up next Nicole who is calling from East Lansing, and she has a question regarding the Great Lakes. Nicole from East Lansing, you're on with Senator Slotkin.
Thank you. Good evening, Senator. I'm worried about the amount of deregulation along with the loss of a lot of the grants that were coming Michigan's way that would have been towards water restoration projects, Great Lakes, but also inland lakes and streams. So I'm wondering what can be done about the loss of funding, but also the cuts, the kind of pushback against things like the Clean Water Act. What can we do to protect our water in Michigan? Thank you.
Yep. Great question, because every Michigander knows that nothing is more important to us, more connected to our natural heritage, more bipartisan, actually, than preserving our Great Lakes and our water and our waters. So thank you for the question. There has been a lot of cuts to federal programs protecting our Great Lakes, everything from invasive species to preventing those algae blooms that are so gross on our Great Lakes, to, as you say, kind of the loosening of environmental protections, and frankly, just not relieving people, laying off people who do that assessment and evaluation. The most important thing that we can do is make clear just how important these things are to the average Michigander, not in a partisan way, not in a nasty way, but in a vocal, clear way. Meeting with your representatives up and down the chain, from local representatives to federal representatives, banging pots and pans on social media, in op-eds, in groups that you're a part of, just talking about it and educating people who may think everything's fine on watching the Great Lakes. I know this works because I've seen it. I've seen that advocacy work. And to give you an example, in President Trump's first term, he zeroed out money for the Great Lakes 3 out of the 4 years that he was in office. And a bunch of us on a bipartisan basis from the Great Lakes states pushed back, advocated. He got letters, he got calls, he got engagement, and he ended up funding that big pot of money for the Great Lakes. So when he put out his budget this year, we were expecting, is he going to zero out money for the Great Lakes again like he did in his first term? And he did not do that. So advocacy works, banging pots and pans work. Call us at our office, make sure we can speak with authority about how important this is to Michiganders, but also educating folks in, if you're in the East Lansing area, educating people on what it means when we don't watch what's being put in our water and what's happening to our water. But thank you for the question. And trust me, this is a passion project for me. Great Lakes are our responsibility as Michiganders, and we're not going to let them be polluted and deregulated to the detriment of every Michigander.
Senator, thank you very much for that answer. Just as a reminder, if you'd like to ask the senator a question, please press *3 on your phone. We're going to go to Mary right now, who has a question, Senator, regarding the releasing of funds in the midst of a disaster. Mary, you're on live with Senator Slotkin.
Hi, Senator Slotkin. It's very nice to talk to you. I just watched this little snippet on TV with Mike Johnson, who stated that funds for disaster relief are to be released per Donald Trump's permission. And I always assumed that it was Congress that had the power of the purse and was able to take care of disaster relief. And with climate change and all of the things that are happening, I'm fearful that he will separate Democrat from Republican states, although he didn't really do that with Texas thus far. But that's my concern. Will he withhold funds if something were to happen in Michigan? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Great question. So let's review the bidding on how it works for emergency assistance. And certainly in Michigan, we right now have an outstanding request for a presidential declaration of emergency because of the ice storm that we had this past spring. So the way it works with emergencies is if you have a natural disaster in your state or a man-made disaster like we had in Flint, Michigan, right, with the water crisis and lead in Flint, Michigan, if a state is not able to cover the enormous costs and help with the recovery fully when a natural disaster happens, they can request a presidential declaration of emergency and the funds that come with it. So that means our governor initiates the request, as she did for the ice storm. Members of the Senate and the House advocate on a bipartisan basis, as we have done on this recent ice storm, right? Democrats and Republicans saying, please, please, please look favorably on a request. And we are waiting for a presidential decision. You're right that Congress has the power of the purse in terms of how much money we give overall to the pot of FEMA. But making a disaster declaration does come from FEMA, which is under the president, not under Congress. So what Mike Johnson said is not a huge departure from how it normally works. But in the way that everything has been politicized over the last 6 months, you're not the first person to ask me the question, well, wait a minute, are we going to get our money? Are we going to get, a favorable look from the White House because we happen to have, let's say, a Democratic government, a governor or Democratic senators? Is politics going to play into it? The good news is that the president had first, in the beginning of his term, been floating ideas of getting rid of FEMA altogether. He had said, you know what, states should take more responsibility. Maybe we shouldn't even have FEMA. Maybe it should become kind of a grant program. We seem to have beaten back that idea. We're not seeing that idea come out of his mouth or other people's mouths. They understand that particularly as climate change creates more storms and more severe storms, that the country is going to have disasters they need the federal government help with. So we are fighting, again, on a bipartisan basis to make sure we get what we need from the ice storm. And and to frankly keep our foot on the gas on making sure this president does not politicize who gets help from the federal government.
Senator, we're going to go now to Patty, who is calling in from Norton Shores, and she has a question regarding the national debt and also a question regarding Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. Patty from Norton Shores, you're on live with Senator Slotkin.
Hi, Senator Slotkin. I have a question regarding our national debt because all the programs which you highlighted in your summary are wonderful. But what are the Democrats going to do to balance the budget and pay down the debt? And what are they going to do to secure Social Security, which by the year of 2033, everything is going to be cut across the board, 23%. And I'm just concerned that there's not going to be enough money to pay for all of these programs because I got all of my information from the government websites, and our interest on debt in the next 10 years is going to be $13.8 trillion. And that's more than all of our other programs. So while all of the programs that you're talking about are wonderful, how are we going to pay for them when we can't balance the budget and pay down our debt? And Social Security has been insolvent for the last 15 years. We've paid out more than we've taken in. So it looks to me like we need to tackle big problems in order to have enough money to pay for anything. So what is your response to that?
Yeah, great question. So let's talk about the debt. And you're right. The debt is out of control. We pay a lot of money just to service that debt. And I'll add something to your recitation. China holds some of that debt, which I got to tell you, as a former CIA officer, I do not like. What I will say about this bill that just passed, the big, beautiful bill, it cuts all those programs you were talking about in order to continue these tax breaks across the board to both individuals and corporations. But it actually raises the debt. It adds to the debt. I think it was to the tune of $3 or $4 billion. I'm looking at my team if they can remind me. I'm getting a trillion. Excuse me. I used the wrong unit. $3 trillion. So this bill adds to our debt, but it doesn't take away from your very valid point that we have a problem, right? Like every household, every family in the country sits down and says, how much money do we make? How much do we have coming in? And how much are we spending? How much is going out? And you can't spend, or you shouldn't be spending more than you earn in. And traditionally, Democrats are the ones who are known to spend and on programs, as you say. And traditionally, Republicans are the ones who cut the revenue coming in. They cut taxes, so they cut the money coming into the government. The truth is, both need to be managed, right? And if we were at a healthier political moment in our history, if we were actually, able to disagree without being so angry with each other, then we'd be throwing ourselves in a room, Democrats and Republicans, closing the door, kicking out the media, and figuring out how we do two things: cut spending and make sure we have a fair tax program so that we have revenue to cover the things that we care about. That's a conversation that adults can have, just like two, parents sitting at the kitchen table have that conversation like adults, and they argue and they go back and forth about spending and income, but they figure it out. That is what the elected leaders on both parties should be doing. But because it's so tense and polarized here, we're not working on those big issues. So you're 100% right. And I would be the first to sign up to be in that room and offer to make tough choices about spending and tough choices about tax policy in order to help balance our budget. Because you're right, the programs that people feel very strongly that they worked for their whole lives, Medicare and Social Security, need to be solvent. They need to be there into the future. People put their chunks of money from their paychecks into those programs. So I feel very strongly that this isn't just kind of a nice to do thing. It's an absolutely required thing. And it doesn't mean we're all going to agree, right? If some Democrats think X and Republicans think Y, well, that's what happens with adults all the time. We disagree, but we come to compromises, and that's what we need to do on our deficit, our debt, and on the solvency of Social Security and Medicare. So you and I, we may have different views on how to get there, but we agree on the problem. That is for sure.
All right, Senator, we're going to head to Oakland County, and we're going to hear from Kathleen, who is calling in from Novi, who has a question regarding ICE. Kathleen, you're on live with Senator Slotkin.
Yes, hello. I have a question. I wonder if Congress could do anything to help rein in the ICE agents that are racially profiling, picking up people, arresting people because they need to meet a quota. And it seems that when we're watching news reports, it seems like every day, it seems that this group is behaving more like Trump's personal police force. That is, the rules that he sets are what's happening, and it's not really anything constitutional. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with humane treatment, and innocent people are also getting picked up too. So I wonder if there's anything that Congress can do to rein in a little bit of this, behavior that we see. Those agents aren't, they have masks on, they don't have ID, they're not having warrants. So it's very scary. I have a family member who has a green card. I'm concerned that there could be some misunderstanding and he doesn't make it through the airport to come home someday. So it hits home for me.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. And we've had a ton of outreach from people like you, family of folks with, immigration status, green cards, or in some sort of visa status. We've had a ton of calls from folks in the immigrant community, people who are Michiganders here legally working as productive citizens who just are scared, sometimes even to go to a public place, which I believe is terrifying for families. So let's review the bidding on what's happening right now. The president has sent an enormous amount of resources, law enforcement, and U.S. military to the southern border, such that there's pretty much no one coming through the southern border at this point. And he made a commitment that he was going to send people who were here illegally back to their home countries, and that he would start with the most hardened, dangerous criminals. Well, obviously, we're seeing what's going on. And I would say what has been deeply concerning is to see, the sloppiness of some of this work. We've had American citizens picked up by mistake and then released. We've had a lot of people who have legal status to be here picked up and then over some period of time, sometimes a long time, released. And what we have seen is that there isn't really a distinction between folks who are hardened criminals, who have been conducting violent acts, who are on the run, who are known to police, but instead kind of a blanket approach, as you have said. I know I've heard from our farmers that they're concerned that they have folks working on the farms that have legal status to be here who are scared to come to work, and it's impinging on their ability to do work. And we see, I'm sure people have seen the reports of just people getting confused as they by mistake get on the tunnel to go to Canada and get stopped. There's all kinds of stories all the time. Yes, there are things that Congress can do. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle need to be a part of that since they are in the majority in the White House, the House, the Senate. And just last week, I authored a bill with a few others that said that immigration officers have to indicate that they are law enforcement, put a badge number, right? So that if someone is inappropriate, they can be reported if they don't handle. I will tell you that if I was walking down the street and a bunch of masked folks without any identification came up to me and started grabbing me, I would have no idea. Is this law enforcement? Is this a gang? Is this a political act against me? I wouldn't know. So at a minimum, law enforcement and our uniformed military should have to identify themselves, particularly if they're in a situation where they're serving in law enforcement roles, arresting people. We also, again, need to hear not only from private citizens, but from the industries that we all know depend on immigrant labor, including in places like Oakland County, where you live. We have a ton of immigrants who are working legally in our engineering firms, our robotics firms, and manufacturing, GM, Ford, the whole thing. We need to hear from people. And I am not asking people to pick a political fight. I'm asking people to call balls and strikes on what these policies are actually doing to their employees, to their friends, to their family, to their workplace. Because we've already seen public opinion start to shift on this. Lots of Americans think that it was absolutely right for the president to close the southern border. There's a lot of people who think, and I'll tell you, as a former CIA officer and Pentagon official, every country in the world gets to know who's coming in its borders, and people should have been a legal vetted status to be here. But that's very different than people being snatched off the street by people without insignia, without identification, and masks. So there's legislation on this, but public opinion also matters. So I'd ask, continue to tell your story. I'd love to be in touch with you. My team can take your information after this and be in touch with you, just because I think stories really get to people. Stories matter, of our family, our loved ones. That's what really changes people's hearts.
Senator, thank you for that. We're now going to head to Melissa, who is calling from Genesee County in Davison, who has a question about the big, beautiful bill and how it relates to schools. Melissa, you're on live with Senator Slotkin.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator. I work for a nonprofit in the Flint community, and I am losing my job in about 30 days because I was fully funded by SNAP-Ed. My job consisted of going into schools and working with communities and teaching people on how to eat healthier. And what I would hear on a daily basis was how hungry our students still are. And from the parents, I would hear how they can't afford more food. So I'm curious how this big, beautiful bill is going to be affecting the school lunches and breakfasts that they currently get for free. And really what's going to happen to our children, because I witness on an everyday basis the hunger, the fear in the parents, and now it's only worse. And now I don't get to go in and teach. So I will eventually be okay, but my heart is completely broken for these children. So where do they stand?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Thank you for your work. I'm sorry that you and many others that I know are being laid off from important work. And thank you for, despite that, still caring and advocating on behalf of children. Children can't learn if they are hungry. Children's brains can't develop the way we want them to develop without food, without nutritious food. So separate from the details I went through on the new work requirements for SNAP, you have the right question on the assistance, the SNAP assistance and Medicaid assistance that were going to our schools. And I'm not going to BS you. That is something that I don't know off the top of my head. And I was just asked this question in the airport by a superintendent of one of our schools. And if my team can take your information, we'll put it out in a second newsletter, because I've been asked a number of times. I just don't want to give you the wrong answer. It's the exact right question. And a lot of our schools are asking, like, what's going to happen to us on both Medicaid and SNAP dollars. So if my team can take your information, just hold on the line, and we'll get back to you. And then for everybody, as long as you're signed up for our newsletter, *6, we will get that information out. I'm also having some Zooms with elected officials and civic leaders to try and get details out over the next couple of weeks. We'll make sure that the schools get that information. But thank you for fighting on behalf of children. If we want children to grow up to be good, productive members of society, they have to eat in order to learn.
Senator, we're now to our last question, and we're going to hear from Mark, who is calling from Brighton. Now that we know the details about the big, beautiful bill, Mark wants to know what's our next course of action. Mark, you're on live with the senator.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for taking my call. Hey, I've been trying to get involved in some way for, I don't know, probably about a year, not politically, but how can I as a citizen or others as citizens, other than, talking to people and posting things and writing letters and calling, how can we get involved to affect change? I specialize in manufacturing, and I actually was so desperate I met with Tom Barrett on this. I've been calling your office, other offices. Nobody calls me back. I'm trying to volunteer my time. How do I get involved?
Yeah. Well, look, I get this question all the time. Kind of, how do I help? How do I move the needle? How do I get involved? The truth is, there's so much news every single day. There's so many issues that are changing so rapidly. It's impossible to do everything, right? It's impossible to peanut butter your spread yourself over every issue, and kind of care equally about every issue. So what I'm asking people to do is one issue that they feel passionate about, go deep on that, right? If manufacturing is your background, I got to be honest with you, if it were up to me, having you involved in things like job training, and helping people transition out of, jobs that maybe they're losing and into that new life, is to me where off the top of my head, I would put you. But we gotta go deep on one issue. That means getting involved, rolling up your sleeves, working with people, finding that other community of people who are working on that same issue. And I will tell you, there's a ton of people who care about job training and retraining and getting people prepared for work, particularly in the manufacturing sector, which is our bread and butter. So again, we can take your information down because I can throw some specifics at you. But to everybody watching, going deep on one thing, I think is going to be more effective than trying to be everywhere at one time. And with so much coming at us, it'll also be more rewarding, especially with cuts to programs going on. We're going to need the community, nonprofit organizations, the private sector to step up to help. And job training and retraining is where I would put you if I were queen for the day. But stay on the line. We'll get your information and we'll follow up. Okay.
Senator, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who has called in and also submitted questions. Thank you for the conversation that we had today. And Senator, your final words for us tonight.
Well, first of all, thank you for tuning in, listening in. Thank you for being engaged citizens and caring about what happens in your community and your country. I know that there's a lot of tension right now in Washington. I know that no one's proud of our political system and the mudslinging that goes back and forth. But I'd ask you not to disengage. The only way this gets better in our democracy is when people engage, participate, speak loudly, and bang pots and pans on the things that they care about. So keep calling us, keep calling others, advocate, educate, and thank you for caring about our state and our country. Have a good night, everybody.